Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by the Hawkeye Beacon and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by publisher Adam Jacoby, managing editor Ross Binder. And yes, you heard me right. We are no longer Go Iowa Awesome. That time has passed. We have now flipped, rebranded. We are the Hawkeye Beacon. You can still find us at iowa.rivals.com. All the same, top tier coverage, exclusive content on our premium boards, on our website, all of that. We are now the Hawkeye Beacon. You'll be hearing from us, as always, at at press conferences, but we'll be self-identifying as Hawkeye Beacon now. So if you hear that, you know it's us. From the Beak might be something that we go with. I know Adam included that in our introductory article. Of course, I'll have that linked in the description like we always do for content we talk about here on the pod. But now that that's out of the way, women's basketball, men's basketball availability going on this week and then this coming week. Women's basketball availability here on Thursday. And of course, Adam was there to check things out. Adam, you've got a few lines that we're going to hit here, a few topics, and of course you got some content coming once we're done with the pod. But first couple things that stuck out to you today from women's basketball availability.
Yeah, what really jumped out to me was this is a situation where a lot of programs would say this is a brand new program, complete overhaul. I mean, one, you're losing a senior class that it not only includes Caitlin Clark, who, is the most decorated individual college basketball player in the sport's history, but you're also losing the likes of Gabby Marshall. You're losing the likes of Kate Martin, who went to the WNBA. Sharon Goodman. Who's the last player that I'm blanking on here, guys? Who's the last senior?
Did you say Kate Martin?
Yep. Oh gosh. Anyway, I hate this. I hate forgetting names. Anyway,
it's just
there's
four,
five.
They're Molly Davis. Five.
Molly Davis.
Oh gosh. Somebody listening was Molly the whole time.
Your girlfriend's gonna kill us, Eliot.
Right, exactly.
Oh, yeah. we have disrespected the headband once, and that is one time too many. Here comes the headband army for us. No, but that's a lot of talent to lose. On top of that, Lisa Bluter with the semi-shock retirement in May, and so with her special assistant Jenny Fitzgerald also announced her retirement as well. So that is a large exodus from especially of familiarity. But they did bring back Jan Jensen, made her the head coach, brought back the rest of the staff, brought back none of the players transferred out, and so they're bringing in a freshman class that they've had a lot of familiarity with. They brought in Lucy Olsen from Villanova. And so for all the new faces, and it's honestly like I think it's a little bit easier to count the people that are familiar that are back versus everybody that left. For all that turnover, though, what the coaches said was this whole group was ready for day one. That Coach Raina Harmon said that the very first day, the very first practice, the very first drill felt exactly like the last practice of last season, which is an incredible compliment to the culture that is surviving through this offseason and also to the players that they're bringing in. They are so high on this freshman class and on Lucy Olsen. So all of that chemistry that really, personified this Iowa basketball program under Bluter, it's all there, guys. It's all still there. And they went above and beyond just lip service in describing how it is still there. And just watching them practice this morning, you see that joy. You see that familiarity, that cohesiveness, even though they're new faces, even though half of them are freshmen, they're ready to be teammates and ready to play team ball. And so this is still going to be a very exciting, very fun season, it looks like. So that was the first thing that jumped out to me today.
Now, when we're talking about the new freshman, obviously that's something we gotta hit on. But I think Lucy Olsen is the headliner here, right? Like just the way she scored the basketball last season. I guess I'm assuming somebody asked or you heard a little bit about like her role coming into the season. Is she like nobody's Caitlin Clark, right? But is she that role where you just put the ball in her hands and good things happen and you go off what she does?
Yeah, obviously she was a big time scorer for Villanova last year. I think it was 23 points. That's sixth in the nation. I want to say, obviously, Caitlin Clark was number one, though. So, yeah, you don't replace Caitlin Clark, and the smart ones just don't even try because it's not fair to the rest of the players. And it's really not fair to Lucy to put those sorts of expectations on her. So they know what they have versus what they don't have. And one thing that really jumped out to me when Jan Jensen was talking about her players in the interviews afterwards, she made a point to mention that Lucy is a pass first point guard. So she doesn't have that range necessarily or anything like that. But when you bring in somebody who was sixth in the nation in passing, or excuse me, in scoring last season, bring them in as a graduate transfer. And one of the first things that you tell us about them is that they're pass first. That tells me that there is a ton of versatility to her game, that she knows how to play in a team context very well. And certainly she was a pass first guard when Maddie Siegrist, who's now with the Dallas Wings, I want to say, was the All-American forward for the Wildcats then. So she knows how to play different roles. She knows how to be the ace, the alpha, if you will, knows how to play within a system and feed the post. And there is going to be some post feeding this year, guys. There's a lot to be excited about there too. But by and large, they just could not stop talking about what a good fit Lucy was with the team on and off the court. They, even when Lucy was visiting, Jada Gyamfi mentioned that she had such a good time visiting with Lucy that she had to go look up her highlights afterwards because she was that excited about her becoming a Hawkeye. And so, that was a little bit of a dream come true for them too. But, we heard multiple times that Lucy was just an instant fit in terms of that culture. So that's going to be sort of the straw that stirs the drink. Whereas, Caitlin Clark was the whole drink herself. Again, you can't ask Lucy Olsen to be everything the way CC was. But she's going to be able to step in day one, game one, and we're already seeing in practice that she can help be that really vocal, upbeat, bubbly would be a good word to describe her, but really that like vocal leader veteran presence in the backcourt. So there's not going to be a whole lot of drop off in terms of the culture and also, the actual production on the floor, even though she's not Caitlin Clark 2.0.
Ross, I don't want to interrupt you if you have any questions on this, but while we're talking about feeding the post, you can't mention feeding the post without referencing Ava Heiden here in this recruiting class. What'd you see from her today, and the rest of the recruiting class for that matter? Adam?
Sorry, I thought you said Ross. No, so Ava Heiden was I'm like, Ross wasn't there. What's he doing? Heiden looked great. And we're talking about somebody who was the highest rated recruit in this class. I want to say she was number 36 in ESPN's top 100. And she looked polished. She looked comfortable. I mean, we basically mostly just saw offensive drills and a lot of post feeds. So she was going to look good. Also, I got to say, guys, Addie O'Grady looks miles better than last year. Again, we're talking about just offensive drills and just one little snapshot of it. But the coaches also had a lot of nice things to say about how O'Grady's offseason has been and how locked in she is. And we could certainly see it in the little amount of practice that we saw. Hopefully we'll see more of that consistency with her on Tuesday morning, which is the second practice that we get. But, I would say Ava Heiden is 1 year tops away from starting. That the tools are there, they're obvious, and she really brings a dimension that Iowa hasn't necessarily had at that center position since at least Megan Gustafson. Because you think about Monica Zanano, you think about Gustafson, and they were topping out at 6'2", maybe 6'3". Heiden is a legit 6'4", and has that like polished post footwork. And so all of a sudden Iowa is not going to be as vertically challenged, especially against the bigger, taller, like more WNBA ready parade of bigs. We certainly saw that in the tournament last season, but even in the Big Ten, no shortage of taller centers. And so Iowa's going to be able to compete vertically, as well as, still seeing Stulke beat them down the floor, still seeing, a variety of post moves from some of the shorter posts like AJ Ediger, who also had some pretty nice looking moves today. And so, we might see more quality minutes out of Ediger this season, especially now that her knee is even further removed from the surgery that sort of submarined her college career. So, yeah, this does look like an Iowa offense that's going to have a lot of different elements to it, ways to beat you in the mid-range, long range, in the post. So a lot for Jan Jensen to work with here in her first year as a head coach.
You've got a couple other things to hit on here. I know you talked about Addison O'Grady, AJ Ediger in there. But tell me about these two other points. I'm sorry if you did address it a little bit in there, but that day one chemistry, and then of course the excitement over, the expectation isn't to go back to the Final Four again this year, at least not right now. Who knows what's ahead, but what did you hear about that today, Adam?
Yeah, so the freshman class that they've brought in has been widely regarded as, very cohesive. Again, like Raina said, one example that Coach Raina Harmon mentioned in terms of that, like picking up right where last season's team sort of left practice off, was on their very first drill, without the coaches having to say anything, like somebody hits a layup and they're all like clapping and counting them, like boom, one. And so that's how locked in they were without the coaches having to lift a finger in terms of like acclimating them to college ball versus high school ball. A lot of that has to do with sort of the culture of better AAU programs that Iowa recruits from, up to and including all Iowa Attack. And so you get a little bit of a taste for high major college ball when you play at really a high major AAU program. So that has something to do with it. But by and large, this is a freshman class that was, had years of familiarity with each other coming into it. I've heard from a couple of them in terms of like how active their little class of 24 group chat is. And they, even with things like the retirement of Lisa Bluter, they sort of experience that together as a group. And so they bring that cohesion as a class with them onto the basketball program itself, and it's just a great fit. And especially in terms of the culture that Iowa likes to have on the court for its women's basketball program, everything that Iowa fans enjoyed about these last 5 to 10 years, they're going to see in this year's team too, except for number 22. Like that's basically about the only difference. And except for the other seniors too, but culturally, this is Iowa basketball that people know and love. That's what we got to see today. And so, yeah, you see the, that familiarity, and the coaches are happy with it, but those external expectations are different. There's nobody, there aren't any national suits parachuting into Iowa City and saying championship game or bust, so they get that sort of almost easing into high major college basketball, that, it's not a like win right away or this whole thing's a bust or anything like that. And they get to sort of play with the unknown and, let these freshmen sort of grow into their roles organically over time. And so without that added burden, of external expectations on their shoulders, the vibe's a little bit looser. The vibe's a little bit more carefree, but, it is still Iowa basketball, and it is still Jan Jensen, even like building in time to her practice schedule for like extra like work and correction and this and that. So a lot of learning to be done, a lot of teaching to be done. And so like the team is probably not going to be as good, as successful as it was last season. But I think you will absolutely see a lot of green shoots. And I would wager that if everybody stays healthy, they will outperform expectations this year, whatever those may be. So a lot for Iowa fans to be excited about there. Absolutely.
What did you see in terms of the outside shooting, Adam? I mean, they're losing a lot of 3-point shooters, and Clark, Martin, Gabby, and Molly to an extent too.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that Coach Jay had, and they are, it's another situation where there's only so much you can do to replace what's leaving. Some of it is just that the offense itself is going to be a little bit more robust and varied.
Are we bringing back the mid range?
Well, Lucy Olsen absolutely is, and she's particularly deadly at that, just because she's got long legs, long arms, and she's so fast off the dribble and can elevate on these jumpers so much that they're almost impossible to defend. And when she's hitting them at a consistent rate, as she's already starting to show in practice, that opens up a whole lot too, because all of a sudden you get defenders, how do you guard somebody who can beat you from the perimeter, from the mid-range, or at the hole, and is fast enough to do all that? So all of a sudden, if she just puts the ball on the floor, it doesn't really give the defense a whole lot of ideas of like, okay, now I have to worry about this. And so as long as they're still worrying about the multiple options that Olsen provides, they're worrying even less about their, the help defense that they have to play. They're worried less about their rotations and what those are going to have to be. And so that puts so much stress on defenses. Now, that being said, and to actually answer your question, Kylie Feuerbach, Taylor McCabe are going to be the primary weapons there. Sita Folter's jumper is starting to really come along. Olsen shot under 30% from deep last season. I know that the coaches think that can come back up. I think some of that was just being a shooter first role that she's not going to have to fill. And we've also heard a few rumblings that Hannah Stolke, who didn't practice today, is working on that sort of set shot. And there's some quiet optimism that she can get above that 35% mark. So there are going to be weapons. I was not going to be necessarily the pump threes, 40 times a game and see what happens when the dust settles sort of situation. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to still be up pace or up tempo. It doesn't mean that they're going to slow anything down. It's just their scoring distribution is necessarily going to look different from last year. But they're happy with the weapons they've got. And I do think especially that we're going to see larger roles for McCabe and Feuerbach this year. And with that is probably going to become more shooting and more just ball in their hand sort of situations too.
Cool. Anything else from today's media availability before we move on to the men and what I heard on, was it Monday? Was it Monday? Monday.
One other little thing, we did not get to talk to Randy Henderson, who's one of the two new faces that were hired as assistants. I know that she is dealing with a family member in hospice. We will get her next weekend, though, or excuse me, next week, next Tuesday. And hopefully I'll get an opportunity to talk to Sean Sullivan, who's the other assistant coach. But Jan Jensen had nothing but the highest praise for Sullivan and sort of his route to coaching. Like, he started as a video assistant, student assistant with Iowa, worked his way up through the ranks. And I'm really looking forward to being able to, talk with him and get that story fleshed out even more. So yeah, really fascinating day, and looking forward to next week too.
For the sake of just checking on what's going on next week, the women's availability is on Tuesday next week.
Yes.
Oh, we got football and women's availability on the same day then?
Let me triple check.
Either way, men's is on Monday. I know that, and that'll be in the afternoon, and then there's football the following day. So that's something we can talk about off the pod too, unless you just found it. But
No,
Yeah.
I just saw the football one. The summer media availability, that is July 16th.
All right.
The nice thing is it's in the morning, so I'll be able to do that, and then we'll take care of football in the afternoon.
And the
This
nice
is really
thing
good
is,
podcasting right now.
the nice thing is you don't live in Des Moines anymore, because that would be a hell of a day. Anyway, speaking of men's basketball availability happening earlier this week and then next week as well. Only new guy that we got to talk to on Monday was Drew Thelwell, but we're going to be getting Cooper Koch, Seydou Traore, and Chris Tadjo next week. Very excited about that. We did hear about all three of them anyway. So much to talk about here. Ross, you and I both got some stuff from that media availability that we got out on the site. But the first thing that sticks out to me, guys, is the two things that we talked about, and the two things that I had heard about going into this media availability. What I was told by people close to the program is that the defense and athleticism are going to be significantly better this year. And there are two players that you think of when you talk about defense and athleticism, and that's Chris Tadjo and Seydou Traore. And you might not be able to throw Drew Thelwell into that same echelon of athleticism, but he is going to bring defense from playing time at Morehead State, and he is definitely athletic at that point guard spot. But those are the two things that stuck out to me the most, and that's why I'm so excited to talk to Seydou and Chris Tadjo next week. And we got to see a little bit of that athleticism from both of them. That video of Seydou doing really well on socials. I can't wait to see what he does this coming season. That 6'7" transfer from Manhattan. But we'll talk about them more a little bit next week. I was thinking about talking to you guys and seeing if you would think we could get a guest on next week and talk a little bit about men's basketball, whether that's a former athlete or another media member. We'll talk about that at a later date, whether it's today or another time. But as far as what we got from the media availability, I think to me, the thing that stuck out the most and why I wrote about it first was that dynamic between Drew Thelwell and Brock Harding. Ross, I know you got to look at that article that I put together, so I don't want to ramble here and say, hey, I'm the host and I went and did this and this is all the information I got. So Ross, I want to go to you here and either tell me what you thought about what was in that article, or if you had any questions about it. What do you got here?
Yeah, no, I thought that was really interesting. That's going to be a big relationship for Iowa this year. You've got the very experienced senior Thelwell coming in. And then you've got Harding, kind of the up and coming sophomore. He's going to, get the keys to run things. Looks like probably next year, now that Thelwell is here this year. But, this is a big transition year for him, for Harding. He's going to hope that he soaks up as much as he can from Thelwell. And yeah, I thought, in your article, you really hit on that, the relationship that they've been able to develop. It sounds like, even though they've only been together or, on the same team and on campus together for just a few months at this point, it seemed like they've really, developed a pretty strong, friendship and working relationship. Is that kind of the vibe you got from practice or the availability?
Yes and no. More so yes than no. The only no part is when I was the first person that came out was Josh Dix. So he was the first person everybody talked to, and then Drew, and then Brock, and then Peyton, and I think Logi was a little bit later too. But Josh, unprompted, said, "Yeah, they get a little chippy, but it's good." And so when we're talking, that's positive. When you're talking about chippiness, but you also tag it with, "Oh, it's good. Oh, it's competitive." All these things, that's positive when you've got a bunch of competitors on the basketball floor. And they also said, oh yeah, and when we step off the floor, we're brothers, we sit next to each other in the locker room, all of that. So that's the only reason I would say no. But they are tight by what they've both said. I think, to me, it's clear that Drew starts this year. They brought him in and told him that they wanted him to lead, that even though Brock stepped up in that way as a freshman and is still doing that as a sophomore, it's still, I think it's pretty clear that Drew is going to be the starter. And I guess the dynamic between the two, what I'm most looking forward to learning is seeing just how much they trust Brock to be on the floor this coming year, because he only averaged 10 minutes a game last year as a freshman. And I think there were times when people wanted to see more of him, because Tony Perkins, for all the good that he brought, did have a little bit of a roller coaster from time to time. He wasn't super consistent. And I think what you're going to get from Drew is consistency. So I just wonder how they play off one another, because I'm just curious again as to how many minutes Brock is going to play. I don't think they share the floor, because one, Drew is 6'4" and Brock is 6 foot, 6'1" maybe. And so you can't. I just don't think you want a point guard and then an undersized point guard on the field or on the floor at the same time. But was that your question, Adam? I saw you raise your hand.
It was pretty close because we haven't really seen Iowa run 2 point guard sets since the days of Mike Gesell and Anthony Clements, which was, I don't want to calculate how many years ago that was. And so we know that Fran doesn't do that very often. But I was a little bit curious, especially since we saw some step up in Brock Harding's perimeter shooting, whether you thought there was going to be any or much time with both of them on the floor, but you think that's probably not going to be plausible. Is that also just sort of because Josh Dix is out there? Like there's too many other good wings to put on the floor?
That's exactly what I was going to say, is you're going to want to keep Josh Dix and Peyton Sanford on the floor as much as possible, right? And Peyton might be classified as a power forward, but he's like a 2 through 4, right? And you trust him to put the ball in his hands. How many times have we seen him walk the ball up the floor and then step into a 3? Like, or not walk it, but, take the ball up the floor and step into a 3. And then assuming Price Sanford takes a leap, and then now you've got Chris Tadjo, and now you've got Cooper Koch, and now you've got Seydou Traore, who will probably be a 3-4. But like, I think they're too deep at that 2 through 4 to be willing to play 2 point guards at the same time. And so I don't think Brock Harding plays 10 minutes a game this coming year. It might be 25-15. Some games it might be 20-20, and some games Brock might even play more than Drew. I mean, we saw how flexible Fran was with the lineups at the beginning of last year before he really solidified it toward the end. And Josh Dix is a secondary ball handler that you can trust. Maybe not necessarily to run the offense, but to have the ball in his hands. So no, I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if that happened. We saw it happen so little, if at all, last year with both Perkins and Brock Harding on the floor at the same time.
And then, do you think that Harding's sort of step up in perimeter shooting? I think I saw that he had hit 10 straight when you guys were at practice. Think that's a mirage, or do you think that he's actually got that stroke down? Because if he's got that, completely different player, I would say.
So I probably misread it last year when I thought that he was struggling from 3. I think it was lack of reps, to tell you the truth, and just how little time he was on the floor and how many shots he got up. I couldn't tell you what percentage he shot off the top of my head, but it wasn't a large enough sample size, I think, to determine just how good of a shooter he is. But he has been working on that. He did say he's been trying to get his shooting pocket up a little bit higher, and that's good because he's small. Like, the lower the shooting pocket, the longer it takes to develop, the more likely it's going to get blocked, right? So that's something he's been working on with Matt Gatens, and I think that's definitely a positive. Do I think they're running down screens for him to get open for a 3? I don't. But I think if anybody's that's happening for is Peyton Sanford and Josh Dix, right? But I think adding that to his supposed bag is a positive. And if he does develop that but becomes a off the dribble shooter, I think, and he can create his own shot even at his size, that'll be dangerous.
Yeah, he shot. Oh, sorry. I was going to say he shot 37.5% from 3 last year, which that's not bad.
Pretty good. That's pretty good.
Only on 40 attempts though. So very, very small sample there.
And it also includes him hitting his last 4 threes of the season. So he was below 33% until postseason started, essentially, like between the Big Ten tourney and the NIT. So yeah, he finished strong, and certainly there's a lot to be optimistic about there too. So we really think that this is something legit to start building on.
I think it's a positive step in the right direction.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say, oh my God, Brock Harding's going to light the world on fire from three. I'm not going to say that.
Brock Curry, you heard it here
right.
first.
Right. So we'll see. I mean, and I could get lucky and hit 10 threes in a row, right? Like, I'd be super freaking lucky, but I could, and it was on air, and but Brock's really good. I'm really excited to see how he and Drew's minutes mesh this coming year. The other thing that was a big takeaway, and I think we can talk more about Seydou and Chris Tadjo next week, so we can kind of skip over that. Same thing for Cooper Koch as well, though Cooper got some pretty high praise from his teammates. Drew Thelwell said, he's a young guy that surprised me. I think Peyton referenced Cooper a little bit and said that he's been playing well. And premium subscribers definitely knew it. And we talked about it a little bit on the pod of him being a 3-level scorer and being ready to go. Talked with his dad at their playoff game this last season. So that'll be tagged in the description as well, of course, for our premium subscribers. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit more too was the fact that Owen Freeman has put on 20 pounds. Man, that's a positive. No, he's not going against Zach Edey this year, but the Big Ten has expanded. The Big Ten's still going to be good at the front court. And he mentioned that as being a positive for a couple reasons. And I think the big one is that he's not going to be in as much foul trouble. He's not going to be leaning on guys for positioning. And he's clearly maintained his athleticism. He was throwing down some dunks for us the other day in transition. And I haven't seen that jumper come to fruition that he talked about either. I haven't seen that. We didn't see it on Monday in a 20-minute practice, right? But I'm looking forward to that. That's something that he's talked about too, and that's something that could solidify him in getting to the next level, playing in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's big if Freeman is able to avoid foul trouble for Iowa this season. That was such a killer for him as a freshman, and you don't hold it against him when he's a freshman and he's just getting acclimated to everything in the Big Ten and all that. So, but the fact that if he's able to stay on the court, because that probably is one of the bigger question marks for this team heading into the season, right? Is who backs up Freeman? I probably Dembele is the.
Yeah. It's kind of weird now that Cricky's gone. It's an odd front court situation between Owen, Dembele, Seydou Traore, and then Evan Bronze and Riley Mulvey. I don't know
Yeah.
what it looks like.
When you run through that list, my takeaway there is, boy, I want Owen Freeman on the court as much as you can get him on the court then. So
right. I don't know what you do with Logi. I don't know if he starts at the 4. I don't know if he's your backup 5. Because I think Seydou should probably start at the 4 based on what I know. But like I said, I've said it multiple times on this podcast, Chris Tadjo could start this year too. So it depends on what you want from your 1 through 4, because Peyton, Josh Dix, and probably Drew Thelwell and Owen Freeman are the 4 locks. And then what do you do with that 4 spot? Or do you start another wing? Like, is Peyton Sandfort your true 4? How do you operate there? Because you probably want an athlete on the floor with those guys, right? And an athlete's going to be Seydou or Chris Tadjo, but they're both young. So Seydou has a year of basketball, college basketball, and he played prep ball, so he's a little bit older. Chris Tadjo's played internationally. Like, there's so much to work with, and that's something that we definitely need to talk about with Fran, because he'll be available on Monday next week as well.
Yeah, I think Dembele. Sorry, Adam. I was just going to say Dembele, I think, will work well in that kind of spark plug off the bench role. If that's where they see him, he can really provide some energy and defense and rebounding in bursts, I think. But sorry, Adam, you were going to add something there.
Well, I was just sort of curious because it certainly I agree with those 4 in terms of locks for the starting lineup, and I don't think that. And I think the 5th starter would have to be sort of a larger wing, sort of in that 4 sort of situation. But as much as we're talking about all these players, the one name that I have not heard is Price Sandfort. Are we thinking that he's? I mean, and certainly he seems too talented to get lost in any sort of shuffles. But what's sort of the prognosis for his sophomore season this year?
Well, we didn't talk about him too much on Monday. He wasn't available. And obviously with Peyton, we were talking more about his decision to come back, Jason Tatum elite camp, all of those things. I don't think Price gets lost in the shuffle, but I do think Price continues to come off the bench. Um, the question mark is his strength, I think, because he is pretty wire thin. I don't know how much, because if somebody's going to usurp his playing time, it's probably going to be Cooper Koch, because
Yeah.
they play a more similar role. But I'd say Cooper's probably better at putting the ball on the floor, and he's more of a 3-level scorer than Price is. At the same time, Price is probably too good of a shooter on the perimeter to keep him off the. This is why I think you really consider a small ball lineup this year because of your lack of depth behind Owen Freeman, other than Lodgy. But there's so much talent in that 2 through 4 spot between. I mean, like, let's go down the list, right? Josh Dix, Peyton Sandfort, Price Sandfort, Cooper Koch, Chris Tadjo, Seydou Traore. Who am I missing? I mean,
Dembele, if you want to throw him into the 4 mix.
I'd probably put him at that 5 spot.
Yeah.
I need to pull up the roster, but like, it's too, it's almost, you don't want to say it's too deep, right? Because it's not. You want depth, but in the front court, we saw what Evan Bronze was last year. He's just a step slow more than often than not. He's an athlete, but he just appears to be a step slow from what I can tell. But in the middle, again, it's 6 players for 6 players for 3 positions, right? The 2 through 4. So somebody's going to get left out because you want Peyton Sandfort and because you want Josh Dix on the floor so much. And maybe you want Chris Tadjo and Seydou Traore on the floor a bunch. So between Cooper Koch and Price Sandfort, which one of them are because and when it comes down to postseason, you tighten up that rotation, right? Maybe early on in the year, we're figuring it out. But towards the end, you're only playing 7, 8 guys, maybe 8. You're not playing 9. So
usually not. Yeah.
What are you doing?
There was one story that got recalled to us last year in women's ball, a story that Bluter told. And it was a question about playing time and how do you manage the depth. And so before the season, Bluter went to each of her players and said, all right, 40 minutes in a game, write down on a piece of paper how many minutes you think you should be playing in the game. And so she got everybody's answers and added them all up. And she said it was way more than 200. And like, you have to fill 200 minutes, and what she got was way more. And so the lesson there was, yeah, we know you should be playing more. Everybody thinks that they should be playing more, and everyone is going to be, disappointed when they're not. And that goes for everybody on the team. And so it's not an individual like thing to be grumpy about. Everybody understands that. And so once you understand that going in, and once you understand that the coaches would probably like to be playing you more, it does get that sort of rotation easier to manage from a coaching standpoint. But it also really underscores the fact that, yes, this is a good problem to have. The sort of like too much depth problem is a good problem to have, but it is still a problem. Like it's a math problem as much as anything. But yeah, I'm glad it's not my job to sort all that out. And I'm glad it's not my job to tell someone who's starter quality that they're coming off the bench, because I see more than 5 starter quality players on this roster. Do you agree?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still some unknown with 3 guys that we could expect to be in the rotation this year, or should expect probably to be in the rotation, between Seydou, Chris, and Cooper. And we didn't get to probably see enough of Brock last year, even though we probably should have. I think Brock's starter caliber. I think Seydou's starter caliber. Who knows with Cooper Koch and Chris Tadjo? They've never played college ball, right? So
Yeah.
there are so many question marks about who's saying they can take a leap forward and who does take a leap forward too, right? Like it's July. We got some time. So we will see come October, November.
Yeah. It does make me wonder how much experimentation we see from Fran in terms of lineups and rotations in that, the early part of the season, that non-conference stretch in November and December. Like, how much does he, try out different combinations and give some of the younger guys more run, maybe to see what they can do. I think by the time the Big Ten season rolls around in full in January, you're going to start seeing things tighten up. And then obviously by, February, March, then you're going to have pretty locked in the guys you want to rely on. By that point, you should know, hopefully. But yeah, I think, you've listed off 6 guys for those 3 spots. What sort of rotation does he do in November and December to give those guys opportunities to see who steps up and who thrives in that spotlight and what that looks like. So it'll be interesting.
Are you riding the hot hand, and are you giving guys enough time to get a hot hand? Right? Like that's what we're running into here, and we shall see. Running up on time here, but wanted to address Big Ten Media Days. Those are coming up here shortly for men's basketball, but also tons of basketball official visits coming up in the fall. Because we were talking about basketball, I want to hit this. Tons scheduled already. More to be scheduled. You can stick along with us or tag along with us at Hawkeye Beacon, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. If you're not a subscriber yet, we got all that information. Another official visit set up today with Amari Bynum from Link Academy. And we have those dates and more details on our premium board at iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. Another one set up, working on talking to some kids about their plans for officials as well. Now, on to football, and I mean it this time. Big Ten Media Days coming up in about 2 weeks in Indianapolis. Adam and I will both be there. Gonna hopefully talk to some other schools about transfers. Might go out there and watch an athlete or a high school athlete or 2 work out. But the main thing coming up, Jay Higgins, Luke Lachey, Quinn Schulte are the 3 athletes that Iowa is sending. Well, I'm not going to say I'm disappointed, but was hoping to see some fresh faces, right? Like we've seen Luke Lachey and Jay Higgins. They were there last year, and Quinn Schulte's been around for a long time. Man, I would have loved to see Cade McNamara on that list. Like, oh, that would have been sweet. And of course, some other transfers like Nick Jackson and some of the other guys that we haven't seen in that setting. Aaron Graves would have been really good. I guess, what do you guys think of the list?
Yeah, I'm excited at the very least to talk to Jay Higgins because he's as reliable a quote as there is on this team. Luke Lachey, I thought was always pretty good for a quote too. Like he's not the, future in TV sort of guy that Higgins is necessarily. But yeah, like I think I would have liked to have seen Nick Jackson on the list too, because every time that we got him, very thoughtful, very, you can see why coaches like him. You can see why he's so productive and was able to get on the field so quickly. Like he gets it. He gets it. And that's not to take anything away from Schulte, because obviously he gets it too. He's got as smart of football head on his shoulders as anybody on that defense. But, he's more of a known quantity to us. We didn't get Nick at the media availabilities last year because of a class conflict. So hopefully at the very least this year, we at least get Nick like week to week in a way that we didn't last year.
Did we? I thought we did.
Not Nick.
I swear I remember him being there regularly.
We might have gotten him once or twice, but we did not get him regularly, and it bummed me out. But yeah, and I think we didn't get. No, we did get a lot of Jay, certainly.
Yeah.
But like, I'll take as much Jay Higgins as the media folks will allow. So,
right.
There was an opportunity to have some, fresher faces, guys that we don't talk to as much, certainly. Nick was on some of the Zoom calls on Wednesdays, certainly, but we didn't get a whole lot of him in terms of the Tuesdays. Regardless, he would have been fun. Sebastian Castro too. I always really enjoyed talking to, and especially like those post-game press conferences that we would have with him. He really sort of let that emotion of the game come through in those sort of situations too. So maybe he wouldn't be as comfortable in the like press, like sort of like when there isn't a game to talk about, maybe it'd be less fun. I don't know. Who knows? But you know, no bad choices here. But it is sort of a situation where if I were putting together my three, it would probably be like Higgins, McNamara, Nick Jackson would have been my three. But regardless, it doesn't take away from any of the excitement that that I have and that fans should have for the for media days. What do you think?
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me is, these are completely unsurprising picks, very deserving. Like you said, Higgins and Lachey did it last year. Schulte, what is he, a 6-year guy? So he's been in the program for a very long time, very established. And we know, Ferentz's MO with this has always been to send, established, longtime leader guys to these events. But the thing that stands out to me is that how many guys you could select from and still meet that criteria, which speaks to the amount of veteran leadership on this team heading into this fall. You guys have mentioned, obviously Cade McNamara. On the offense, so you've also got, Caleb Johnson has been there. This is his 3rd year. LaShawn Williams has been there a long time. The offensive line is full of guys who have been in Iowa City forever. Connor Colby, Mason Richmond, Jennings Dunker, etc.
Logan Jones would have been really good.
Logan
Jones have been great.
Yeah,
can you imagine Jennings Dunker at a Big Ten media day? Like,
excellent,
fingers
right?
crossed for his senior year,
right? Maybe next year. But I mean, those would all be good choices. And on defense, you've listed a bunch already, but Nick Jackson, Sebastian Castro, Jamari Harris, there's a guy that's been around a long time. So, just a ton. Even Xavier, I mean, he's younger compared to the other guys, but I think there's just a lot of. What's that?
Deontay Craig.
Deontay Craig, excellent choice. Yeah, for sure. So I think it's interesting, and it's one of those smaller things that makes this coming season really interesting. You thought about it when all those guys announced they were coming back in January for their, one more year, but the amount of it really kind of stands out when you're thinking about an exercise like this too, that the amount of veteran leadership on this team next year, or this coming season, is very, very high. And that doesn't guarantee anything, but it's generally a good sign. It's a sign that they shouldn't be, this team shouldn't be phased by many situations or many predicaments, or they've seen a lot, they've done a lot, they've been through the fires, as it were, and that's really interesting.
One more name that sort of popped in my head, and this would be just me picking selfishly, LeSean Williams. Like, that guy is a guaranteed quote every time he opens his mouth, and I get why Ferentz might not want him as much. He's a little bit of a loose cannon with his quotes, but in a fun way. And I kind of wish that Iowa would embrace that as much as they did with like Kayvon Merriweather. When he was, his last year or two, when they sort of let him loose a little bit. LeSean's a lot of fun too. So yeah, like there's so many big personalities on this team, and I think of the list of like the biggest personalities, the most gregarious talkers, you really only see one of them in Jay Higgins in this list of 3. Again, that's not to take anything away from Lachey, not to take anything away from Schulte. And like, they've earned their leadership spots. They're great representatives of the program, but just in terms of not really knowing what they're gonna say when you ask them a question, like, yeah, there's some other more like fun, for lack of a better term, options that were out there. But again, this is yet another of the good problems to have. Too much depth in the press game.
All righty, that'll do it for us on this episode of HawkCast. Thanks so much for tuning in. and enjoying the content over at Hawkeye Beacon. That's right, rebrand Hawkeye Beacon, iowa.rivals.com. Still great content from us, exclusive content on the recruiting trail. Of course, Iowa women's and men's basketball and football. So don't miss out. Subscribe there, iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. If you're joining us today on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button there as well. Drop a like, drop a comment. Who would you have liked to seen at media days, as well as what's your lineup for Iowa men's basketball this year? Who are you most excited about? Maybe other than Lucy Olsen for women's basketball. Drop a comment, let us know, hit that like button. And if you're listening on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and more, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Hit that rate and review button. It helps us out a lot, and it makes us very happy. For now, my name is Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Adam Jacoby and Ross Binder, and we will see you next time.